Hi everybody, I'm Scott Schneider, author of Diamond in the Rough. One of my favorite stories in the Bible is when Jesus healed the paralytic. You remember, he was in a home in Capernaum and he was preaching. It was packed out and there were 4 guys that were determined to get their paralyzed friend healed. They couldn't get in, so they went up to the roof, dug a hole, and literally lowered him right in front of Jesus. Jesus wasn't offended at all, and matter of fact, through the falling dirt and the pieces of hay, looked up and marveled at them for doing what they were doing. He had healed before, and I'm sure everybody's expectation was that he would heal again. But as the man was laying there, Jesus turned to him and said something that offended some and made absolutely no sense to everybody else. "Be of good cheer, son. Your sins are forgiven." And that was it. What an odd thing to say to someone who was laying on the ground and still unable to walk. But to me, that gap, that in-between, holds the biggest message. Let's take a deeper look. Jesus was obviously in the business of reading hearts that day. He read one from a man who knew he needed more than just a healing in his body, but in his soul. A connection was made, an exchange, and his sins were indeed forgiven. And Jesus declared that publicly. And as the man lay there, still paralyzed, Jesus took a moment to read the hearts of another group of men who were not so merciful, and in fact challenged his authority to do what he just did. A blasphemer is what you think I am, isn't it? He brought out to the open. But let me ask you something. What's easier? To forgive this man's sins or to tell him, arise and walk? Make no bones about it, Jesus was going to heal that man from the beginning. In fact, in the original Greek it says that when he turned to him, he was already arising. But sometimes it's in those in-betweens that God allows where we can experience him the most and rely on him the most. That place between knowing God and being sick, or knowing God and losing a loved one. My in-between was when I was 24 years old and on my back, not physically, but certainly spiritually. Growing up, my mom had a serious alcohol problem and eventually took her life when I was 18. My family struggled. I covered my pain by being tremendously driven, a good student, and even going into law school. I would be enviable, I said to myself. Of course, riding alongside of that were my medications of drinking, sexual sin, and the shame that inevitably attaches itself to that. Finally, a few years later, I broke down and couldn't continue the facade any longer. And I was lying before Jesus because I had no other place to go. Like the man that we see in Capernaum, I didn't need a change in circumstances as much as I needed a change in here, because it was what was in here that was killing me. I needed a change in my heart. I needed forgiveness for my sin, which I got that day. And although my life has been far from perfect since then, and full of in-betweens, I'm a friend of Jesus now, who's always there. And he will be there for you too, whether you're sick or not, whether you lost your job or not, or even if you're paralyzed. His love and salvation is there in the in-between of wherever you are. So you can stand, and I can stand, and we can stand together in the faithfulness of God.